Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be exploring how high finance and cutting edge technology are starting to kind of really interact.
Yeah.
And specifically, we'll be looking at a presentation that was given at Princeton University by Dr. Yogesh Malhotra.
Okay.
He is a leading expert in artificial intelligence, quantum finance, and risk management.
Okay.
So really kind of like a big picture, a broad thinker
I see.
in this space. And our goal is to try to understand how human intelligence and all this incredible new technology are going to work together
Yeah.
in the world of finance. Like, are there limits to what AI can do or algorithms can do?
Mm-hmm.
What role is human intuition still going to play? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, those are definitely hot topics these days,
Yeah.
especially when you think about Dr. Malhotra's background. He's had quite a career working with some pretty major institutions.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like Goldman Sachs,
Wow.
JP Morgan,
Okay.
even the Pentagon.
Oh, wow.
So he's got a pretty broad perspective on all this.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
What's interesting too is like his track record of predicting big technological shifts.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about things like cloud computing
Wow.
way before most people even knew what it was.
Oh, really?
And he was also talking about the limits of traditional risk models
Oh,
in finance, those like old school risk
Yeah.
models. Yeah, well, he was kind of saying they weren't going to cut it.
huh.
And he was right.
Oh, wow.
And even, this is fascinating. He was saying we needed to move beyond RSA 1024 encryption
Okay.
like years before it became a mainstream concern.
So it seems like this is someone who really understands both the power of technology, but also the potential pitfalls.
Exactly. He sees both sides of the coin.
And it's interesting because his presentation at Princeton really gets into this at the heart of it.
Hmm.
And he starts with this fascinating infographic.
Okay.
It's called the Cognitive Bias Codex. Cognitive Bias Codex. And it basically lists over 180 cognitive biases
Yeah.
that affect how humans make decisions.
Oh, wow. So all the ways our brains can kind of trick us.
Right. Yeah. And this is where it gets interesting, right?
Okay.
Because he's showing all these biases, but at the same time saying that the human mind is still the benchmark
Yeah.
that artificial intelligence and deep learning are trying to copy.
Huh. That is kind of a paradox, isn't it?
It is. It's like saying, even with all our flaws, our
Mhm.
human brains still
Mhm.
have something that computers haven't quite figured out yet.
Right.
So how does he explain that? How does Dr. Malhotra sort of reconcile that?
Well, he has this really interesting philosophy. He says the future isn't just about AI. It's about combining what he calls smart minds with smart tools.
Ah, so it's not humans versus machines, it's humans plus machines.
Exactly. He's not talking about replacing human intelligence. He's talking about augmenting it. He thinks we need to focus on really honing our critical thinking skills, our intuition, our ability to make sense of complex situations.
Yeah.
Stuff that AI is still really struggling with.
It's like that sense-making thing that I've heard about. Like, we can look at all this data, but humans are really good at kind of making sense of it, connecting the dots.
Yeah, exactly. And, he's been saying this for years, like way back. He was warning people about putting too much focus on just IT investment and not enough on investing in people.
In human capital.
Right. Investing in human capital.
Yeah.
He was saying you need both. And it seems like the financial world is starting to listen.
Oh, really? What makes you say that?
Well, there have been some really interesting shifts in the hedge fund world lately.
Like what?
Well, some of the biggest hedge funds out there, they were all about using AI-powered systems, right?
Yeah.
But they started losing money.
Oh, wow.
And now some of them are actually shifting back to strategies that are more driven by humans.
Huh. Interesting. There have even been reports of these hedge funds not being able to explain how their fancy AI systems were making money.
Really?
Yeah. Which is a bit of a problem, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure.
If you can't explain how the system works, how can you trust it?
That's a good point.
And then, of course, there's the famous case of Warren Buffett.
Oh, yeah, the Oracle of Omaha.
Right. He made a bet against a hedge fund manager who was super reliant on algorithms.
I remember that.
And Buffett won. He stuck with his old school approach, focusing on fundamentals, human judgment.
Yeah.
And it paid off.
So what's the takeaway there? Is AI just not ready for prime time in finance?
Well, I think it shows that AI can be a powerful tool, but it's not a magic bullet.
Yeah.
It's not going to solve all our problems. We need to be really careful about how we use it and understand its limitations.
So where do we go from here? If even the big players in finance are realizing they need human insight, what's the next step? That's the question, isn't it? And that kind of brings us to this really fascinating guy, Fisher Black.
Okay.
Now, he was a pioneer in the field of what they call quantitative finance, the whole numbers side of finance. And he was one of the brains behind the Black Scholes model.
The Black Scholes model, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really famous model that changed how people price options. Actually, he should have won a Nobel Prize for it.
Oh, really?
But unfortunately, they don't award them posthumously.
I see.
But anyway, his insights are still really relevant today.
And what were his insights?
Well, here's the interesting thing. Even Black, who was a brilliant mathematician,
Right.
he helped create one of the most important financial models ever. He was the first one to say
What?
that models have limitations.
Yeah.
And that human intuition is still really important.
So he was like, don't just blindly trust the numbers.
Exactly. In fact, Emmanuel Derman, who's like a big name in financial engineering,
Okay.
he said that machines are never going to be able to copy.
What? That pragmatic intuition, imagination, and inspiration that guys like Fisher Black had.
Interesting.
So even the pioneers of quant finance are saying, hey, there's something special about how humans think that we can't just program into a machine.
So that's a lot to think about. Even the most mathematical fields still need human intuition. So where do we go from here? How do we blend these two things together? The power of technology, the power of human intuition. How do we do that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next part of this deep dive, because Dr. Malhotra has some really interesting ideas about this thing he calls anticipatory risk analytics.
Anticipatory risk analytics.
Yeah, it's a way of going beyond traditional risk models.
Okay.
And actually trying to anticipate the unexpected. And that might be something humans are better at than machines. So stay tuned, because we're going to unpack all of that in the next part.
Can't wait. This is getting really good. This deep dive is going deep. We'll be back in a moment.
So this idea of anticipatory risk analytics.
Yeah.
It sounds like Dr. Malhotra was kind of ahead of the curve on that.
He was, yeah. It's really interesting how it's gone from a kind of fringe idea to something that every financial institution is thinking about.
So what is it exactly? It sounds kind of like, sci-fi almost.
It's not predicting the future with a crystal ball.
Okay.
It's more about recognizing that our traditional models for managing risk, they have some blind spots.
Yeah.
They're very backward looking, right? They're based on historical data,
Yeah.
and they're good at calculating probabilities based on what's already happened.
Which makes sense, right? If things are kind of stable.
Yeah. If the world stays the same.
But the financial world doesn't stay the same.
No, it definitely doesn't.
It's always changing.
Yeah. And that's where those traditional models can kind of, break down. It's like trying to drive a car by only looking in the rearview mirror.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You can see where you've been, but you're going to crash if you don't look ahead.
So how do you look ahead when it comes to risk?
Right.
How do you anticipate things that haven't even happened yet?
Yeah, it's not about knowing exactly what's going to happen.
Okay.
It's more about being prepared for surprises.
Okay.
Being ready for things that nobody saw coming.
So build systems that can adapt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Systems that are agile, that can respond to the unexpected.
So instead of trying to predict every possible scenario, you're saying build in the capacity to kind of adjust on the fly.
Exactly. You can't control everything, but you can control how you react.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how does this tie back into the whole human versus machine thing?
That's where it gets really interesting. Because Dr. Malhotra thinks that this whole idea of anticipating surprises, that might actually be something that humans are really good at.
Really?
Yeah. We're naturally curious. We question assumptions. We're always looking for patterns.
So like detectives.
Yeah. And we can change our minds when new information comes along.
Yeah.
Those are things that are really hard to program into a machine.
So it's like our messy, imperfect brains, they're actually an advantage in this unpredictable world.
It is kind of a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, those very things that make us human.
Yeah.
Our intuition, creativity,
Yeah.
our ability to learn and adapt.
It might actually give us an edge in this age of AI.
He thinks so.
This is making me think about AI in a whole new way.
Oh.
It's not just about automation.
Right.
It's not just about replacing humans. It's about figuring out how to work with machines and how to use them to navigate this crazy world.
And to recognize their limitations.
Yeah.
That's what he calls system credibility.
System credibility.
Yeah, you can have the most sophisticated algorithm in the world.
Okay.
You can have the most powerful computer, but it's not enough.
Oh.
You got to understand what's going on under the hood. You got to know the assumptions that went into building that model, the biases it might have.
Okay.
You got to know when to trust the machine and when to trust your gut.
Which is interesting because we've seen what happens when people trust models too much.
Oh, yeah. 2008, for example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about all those value at risk models.
RMR models, yeah.
Yeah, they were supposed to help banks manage their risk.
Right. They were supposed to be the answer,
but
they didn't account for those, like, really crazy events, you know.
The black swan events.
The black swans, exactly.
It's like that saying, all models are wrong, but some are useful. How do you know which ones are useful?
Right. That's the question.
Yeah.
It's not that the models themselves are bad.
Okay.
It's how we use them.
Okay.
We can't just blindly trust what they spit out.
Yeah.
No matter how fancy they seem.
We have to be critical thinkers.
Exactly. We got to be willing to question the results.
Yeah.
Especially if our intuition is telling us something's not right.
So it's not just about AI, it's about AI plus
HR.
Human intelligence.
Human intelligence, yeah.
Yeah.
Finding that right balance is crucial.
Yeah.
Knowing when to trust the machine and when to trust yourself.
It sounds like Dr. Malhotra is calling for like a whole new way of thinking about technology, especially in fields like finance.
He is. It's not just about adopting the latest tools.
Yeah.
It's about developing a whole new mindset.
Yeah.
One that's comfortable with complexity, with uncertainty, with the fact that surprises are going to happen.
Yeah.
And that takes smart minds as much as smart tools.
This is a really powerful conversation.
It is, yeah.
I'm starting to see AI in a whole new light.
Yeah.
It's not just about replacing us. It's about, helping us.
Yeah, helping us deal with this increasingly complex world.
Exactly. But how do we actually do that? How do we build these smart minds?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk about in the last part of this deep dive. Dr. Malhotra actually gives some specific suggestions for how to bridge that gap between theory and practice.
I'm looking forward to that. This deep dive is really making me think.
Good.
Let's continue exploring in just a moment. So we've talked a lot about Dr. Malhotra's ideas about, humans and technology, all that.
Yeah.
But how do we actually put this into practice? How do we actually, cultivate these smart minds that he keeps talking about, especially in a world that's so driven by technology, right?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? And Dr. Malhotra, he does have some really practical suggestions.
Okay.
First off, he talks a lot about continuous learning and adaptation.
No, so not just going to school and getting a degree.
Right. It's not just about acquiring knowledge. It's about being able to use it in new situations, in ways that you maybe didn't expect.
So kind of like what we're doing with this deep dive, right? Taking these complex ideas
Exactly.
and breaking them down.
Yeah, making them relevant, making them understandable.
Yeah. So that's one thing. What else?
He also talks about critical thinking.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Being able to really analyze information, see things from different perspectives.
And not just accepting things at face value.
Exactly. You got to question assumptions.
Yeah.
Got to look for those hidden connections.
It's like we're intellectual detectives.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Always searching for clues, trying to piece together the bigger picture.
And is that it? Is there anything else?
Well, he also emphasizes collaboration.
Okay.
Sharing knowledge.
So not just keeping it all to yourself.
Right. You got to be able to learn from other people.
Yeah.
Bounce ideas around, get different perspectives.
It's like that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone.
Yeah.
If you want to go far, go together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in today's world, we need to go far together.
So it's like a whole holistic approach to developing these smart minds. It's learning, it's thinking critically, and it's working together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what he thinks is going to be key for navigating this whole AI revolution.
So in the end, it's not really about AI versus humans.
Right.
It's about AI plus human intelligence.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of artificial intelligence, the future of work, all of that.
Me too.
It's not just about automation.
Right.
It's about augmentation.
Mm-hmm.
It's about working with these powerful tools,
Yeah.
but also, recognizing their limits.
And recognizing our own strengths.
Exactly. So I guess the question for all of us now is,
Yeah.
how are we going to prepare for this future?
Mhm.
How are we going to, cultivate our own smart minds?
Yeah. How are we going to embrace these new technologies?
Yeah. But also, hold on to our human ingenuity, intuition, all of that.
That's a challenge, isn't it? Finding that balance.
It is. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all of you listening out there, thank you for joining us. We hope this has given you some new things to think about, some new perspectives on the future.
Yeah, keep those smart minds engaged.
Keep diving deep. Until next time.